Oh yes, we are attending the International Air Transport Association's conference with the main focus on Africa. And of course, we know that the continent passengers are still enduring very high cost of tickets. And there are a number of factors that are actually unique to Africa. For more on this, we are now joined by the chief economist of the Air Transport Association, Ms. Owens Thomsen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
What are some of the factors that are really making it difficult for many airlines on the continent to be profitable?
Well, there are many of those. You know, perhaps I would start with a fragmented regulatory environment. You know, aviation is a uniquely global industry, and if we have fragmented regulations, different types of regulations in different countries, that impedes on how much we can fly, which of course leads to a more challenging profit scenario. And then, of course, the costs are literally higher in Africa than in other regions in the world, notably the cost of fuel. And fuel is the main cost component of all airlines, about a third of all airlines' costs, rising to potentially 40% of African airlines' costs. And African airlines pay on average 20% more for their fuel than other airlines in the world.
What's the reason? I mean, we know we've got a global supply and manufacturer of fuel that supply everyone else. Why is it costly for African operators?
Yes, these are inefficiencies in the supply chain and indeed lack of economies of scale, maybe in some instances, lack of refining capacity in other instances that mean that the supply of the product in a particular location is limited. And of course, as soon as you get limited supply, you tend to get higher prices.
Are the same factors also affecting lack of connectivity that we're seeing in Africa?
Yes, absolutely. I think that oftentimes it's perceived that aviation is like a luxury product, that we don't need to cultivate because it's just for the rich people. But then we forget completely that aviation and all forms of connectivity, all forms of transportation, all of these things together are what enable us to grow and what enable us to do other things. So without this connectivity, we will trade less, and all the other economic activities that we might want to engage in will be much more complicated if we don't have this connectivity. So I would emphasize aviation's role as a growth catalyst, much more important than the share of aviation in the local economy.
Another cost driver is, of course, charges and taxes that passengers that use airlines on the continent have to endure, which is often higher compared to other jurisdictions.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, many, of course, countries all over the place tax aviation, but it is exceptionally high in many African countries, and in South Africa in particular, exceptionally high taxes and charges placed on aviation. And I believe that again, relates to how we view aviation. If we view aviation as a luxury product that we don't really need, then of course we can tax it, because higher taxes will impede that activity, so we will have less aviation. And if one holds that worldview, that might make sense. But if you hold the worldview that aviation is actually a catalyst for the growth strategy of the government, then we understand that we should try to take the opposite strategy, which is to try not to tax it so much, maybe even subsidize it to some degree, if that is possible, in order to allow this activity to flourish so that it can bring other activities with it in its wake.
As ITA, what are some of the initiatives and measures that you're trying to put in place to address some of these issues that you're raising?
Well, I mean, for sure, we already have lots of activities in favor of helping airlines with their fuel supply in general, meaning, how they can access Jet A at a competitive price. And then, of course, we are very engaged in trying to help airlines managing the road to decarbonization and accessing, therefore, sustainable aviation fuels at a competitive price as well, which is, of course, the major challenge between now and 2050, and something that would necessitate actually financial sustainability on the side of the airlines in order to achieve the environmental sustainability. These two things will go hand in hand, and we can't have one without the other.
This will definitely affect the turnaround plans of many airlines on the continent. Some of them have difficulties, especially after COVID. I mean, SAA being one that's really doing its best. How is this affecting those turnaround and to see those airlines becoming profitable?
Well, we have a wide range of profitability across the industry in the world as a whole, of course, between the airlines that are struggling to make a profit and then a small population of very profitable airlines. But if you look over a history of aviation, the profitability tends to be, if we're talking net profit margins, I would say maybe 5-6% profit margins would be already an amazing performance. And today the industry as a whole is at about 3% net profit margin. And just to give you some perspective of what that means compared to other industries, we can say that in general the oil and gas sector might realize close to 30% profit margins, and the banking sector in general also tends to reach something close to 30% net profit margins. So we understand how vulnerable the whole aviation sector is, and that this vulnerability will impede all of these decarbonization plans of the industry as a whole.
My final question, what are some of the challenges that are unique to Southern Africa?
I think indeed the uniqueness is in that the cost picture is so much higher. Yeah, so you're operating in a market that is obviously less mature than the rich countries' aviation markets. So that puts challenges upon those airlines on the demand side. And on top of that, you're operating in a cost environment that is penalizing these particular airlines compared to airlines in other countries, and notably in the mature countries. So it's a double whammy of complications for airlines in this region, unfortunately. And it merits, I think aviation merits a reconsideration about its strategic importance in economic development for this problem to be solved at the root.
I know I've been saying my final question. This is definitely my final one. The issue of safety on the continent. And you've mentioned in your presentation that the safety element is about 7 times higher compared to developed countries. Just explain that, please.
No, it's not that. It's a question of how we define incidents per thousands of passengers. And of course, we also have to remember that the nature of aviation in this area is different from other countries, where here we have predominantly a much higher use of smaller aircraft and turboprop aircraft and so on, which create a number of incidents that push those numbers higher. It doesn't mean that aviation in South Africa is less safe than in other places. On the contrary, I think South Africa has a stellar safety record and did an excellent 2023 that we hope will be beaten in 2024.
All right, thank you very much. That's Mary Owens Thomsen. She's the chief economist at the IATA, that's the International Air Transport Association. They are hosting a 2-day conference looking at a whole lot of other issues and factors that are affecting the aviation, particularly in Africa.